Hey there, Internet! Welcome! My name is Jack Packard. Here I am to rock you like a hurricane.
I'm Darren Mooney, and I'm here to have a nice conversation with you in very civil tones.
I'm KC Wosu, and clearly I was constructed by Stark Industries, so that's why I'm here.
This week we will be discussing episode 3 of WandaVision, aka Now in Color. Was that the
That's
title?
the title. They now have titles. When they launched originally, they didn't have titles. They were just episode 1, episode 2, and episode 3. Retroactively, yeah.
Exactly. We are in full Technicolor. We have moved on to the 70s era television, and some exciting things have happened. Have enough exciting things happened? We have not enough. The Vision and Wanda, they're still there. It's a crazy time. Welcome to a marvelous escape. Here's something I didn't mention when we talked about episode 1 and 2 that I'd like to start off by saying before we dive deep into the actual episode is there is like a little serotonin hit, a little bit of like nostalgic joy every time I see and hear the Marvel Studios intro. Just that, like, I am prepared for a good time. Dun, 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 dun. You know, they flip through the books and we see the logo. It's like, I'm ready.
I have a hot take on this, actually. I think the Marvel logo, and again, this is a very weird discussion to have on a WandaVision podcast, but for me, and again, this is where I'm old man shaking fist at sky, indulging my own nostalgia. Was the Marvel Cinematic Universe logo better before before they had enough films that they started slotting film stuff into it? When it was just like comic book stuff, when it was the sound of comic books page turning and kind of illustrations by like Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby and Jim Lee and all these iconic characters that you love, and like the sensation of kind of flipping through a comic book and seeing that on screen and being like, yeah, this is where all this stuff is coming from, as opposed to now where it's very much, oh no, we've been doing this for 12 years now, and we have enough material that we can just show you Mark Ruffalo as the Hulk, because there never was any other Hulk. We can give you kind of like concept artist Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow. We can show you lines in the script, because you know that we own this property and we made it into a movie. I mean, I like it, and I do think Jack's right that there's a strong serotonin hit that comes off it, particularly because of the brand loyalty that they've built and the general level of quality that they've managed to maintain, where the worst movie you've made is probably The Dark World. You're probably not doing too bad, let's be fair. But I do feel a little bit of a nostalgic pang for the old kind of like the sound of the paper flipping and kind of like the images from the old comic books, and it just being like, yeah, this is the nerdy little thing that we came from, and look at us now.
I honestly think they have earned the right to say this is our history now. You know, all of this stuff did come from the comic books, but the MCU is, you know, generally a different take on a lot of those stories. So I think that was the biggest hurdle in the beginning, was to get comic book fans to accept these adaptations. But now, clearly, there's no doubt that they're all accepted. So it's like, yeah, we make movies and TV, and this is stuff you love. So here, look at
Comic
it.
books? What are those things? No,
Like, those are for nerds. Movies are for real
Serious business.
like for real fans.
I mean, Casey does have a point there. Like, more people will have seen, like, even the lowest rated, lowest earning Marvel Studios film, say Incredible Hulk starring Edward Norton, because that was a thing, than read comic books on a monthly basis. Look at the sales figures for Captain America, for Iron Man, stuff like that. So yes, I think Casey's entirely right that for most people, when they think of Marvel, it's now like, oh, you know, they publish comic books as a bit of trivia, as opposed to, like, the core root and function of the business. So I think that I can see that. I think that's fair.
Right, I remember when Nintendo used to make playing cards,
Yeah.
or whatever they did.
Right. So something interesting about this episode as the story moves forward, only one commercial this time. Only one commercial break, the Hydra soak commercial with the mom in the bathtub.
Which was a nice shout out, I think, to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where they did something similar, where there was soap that was used by Hydra to literally brainwash you, because you get it's brainwashing, because it's soap.
Nice.
I appreciate game recognizes game. Sorry.
I know it's very nice. Though, like, the other commercial breaks were like a little bit of Stark, a little bit of like technological side, and a little bit of Hydra side. Right? They were playing both angles, so it's interesting that in this one it was just a Hydra commercial.
Well, I mean, it was 1-on-1, right? Because we watched the 2 episodes back to back, so they kind of merged. So the first one was Stark, the second one was Strucker. This is Hydra. I think like it makes sense if you're looking at it in terms of like Wanda incorporating her traumas into the episodes. So it's like, okay, the Stark beeping toaster machine is like the bomb that she was staring at in the apartment.
Yeah.
The second one is like Strucker, so he's the guy who found her, who convinced her to like turn herself into a weapon of mass destruction. And now it's Hydra, which is like, oh, by the way, this is the thing that Strucker was involved in, and it's in the background. Although I do, again, this is one of the interesting things I think we talked about last week, where like, is that stuff like, is it foreshadowing? Is it hinting at stuff that is to come?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it simply a way of like contextualizing the psychology of the character and telling us that like, no, what Wanda's doing is she's sublimating her trauma and kind of burying it in the commercial breaks of this life she's constructed for herself, which I find interesting.
You're absolutely right, by the way. I was mushing episode 1 and 2 together in my head, thinking that each of those had 2 commercial breaks.
Yeah.
Many apologies.
But no, yeah, I think Darren, you're like hitting the nail directly on the head in that those commercials are like, and this most recent episode is really selling me on the whole dream logicness of the entire show. Like, this is clearly Wanda's doing. Like, we were speculating on that for the first 2 episodes. I think for sure this is Wanda that's doing all this. Mm-hmm. And those commercial breaks are literally like just fragments of her history manifesting in this weird way because it's all tinged on this whole sitcom aesthetic. Yes. So I think that's exactly right. Yeah, I think it's a little bit more, it's telling us a little bit more about the story than we think it is at first glance.
Yeah. No, I should. Sorry.
I was just going to say, on that note, they went really hard in this episode as far as like the switch between like Wanda's real problems and Wanda's sitcom problems, right? Like the sitcom problems are all fun and goofy and, have the laugh track to them. But when Wanda's real problems start to seep in, it goes silent, the tone changes, the actors' faces visibly change, and you can see Wanda really push to be like, no, easily solvable sitcom problems, that's the problem here. Not real world problems, not trauma, not death. There's a stork in the house. Whoa. Yeah.
What I would say, actually, what's kind of interesting that Casey brought up there, which is last week, I hope nobody goes back and watches last week's episode because I was terrible in the prediction game there. Jack was great. Jack got all of the predictions. Jack was like, "Yeah, we're doing a simple sitcom birth here. It's going to be very easy."
Oh yeah, you were 100% right.
You were 100% right on that. So well done, Jack, on that.
I don't remember a thing.
Call my bluff. Keep score. Yeah, no. If anybody asks, and as long as you're not reviewing the tape, I got everything right as well. Darren did not get anything right whatsoever. What I will say, though, to bring it back to what KC said about like this being Wanda's trauma, one of the things I got wrong last week was I assumed that like they were pairing Wanda and Vision. So the idea was the Stark toaster in the first episode I thought was Vision because it had the blinking red light like the soul gem in Vision's forehead. Yeah. I don't think so. I think now that ticking is very clearly the bomb in the apartment and the ticking is like waiting for it to go off as she described it. Mm-hmm. What that means and what I think makes it interesting, and here's where Darren like lines up a big one, and nobody's going to know if I'm wrong for a good 8 weeks, so I'm going to enjoy this. But here it is. Vision is clearly a figment of Wanda's imagination here. So I think that he's being entirely constructed by her. She's fabricating him out of thin air. Mm-hmm. And I think what kind of gets interesting about that is the idea that he's the one who's questioning the nature of his reality. So obviously in the first episode you have him asking, well, what do I do here at my stereotypical sitcom job? Previous episodes like, so what do we do here at the stereotypical guys meet up and have a subplot kind of element of a thing? And here you have him go, yeah, isn't it really odd how all of our neighbors are behaving? And she just kind of rewinds it and resets his personality. Yes. And here is my big swing for the finale, is that like it's going to be, you're going to have the outside world trying to come in and trying to convince Wanda that she's living an illusion and a lie and that it's fake and she needs to quit and she needs to break out of it. Mm-hmm. It's going to be Vision who makes that appeal to her. It's going to be Vision as a manifestation of her personality. It's Vision, her creation of Vision will be so lovingly and so artfully created that it will actually try to protect her in the way that Vision really would. Yes. And he'll ultimately make the argument, no, you need to move on. You need to accept, you need to let me go. And I think like the greatest,
familiar.
Yeah, there we go. The greatest thing about that, and well done, Casey, is that it would actually be a reference to 2010's Shutter Island, directed by Martin Scorsese, which would be a great way of bringing Scorsese into the MCU, and therefore, like in a TV show, not even in cinema, but kind of tying those things together. But the idea that she's going to have to confront the idea that this is unreality, but it's going to be Vision, or it's going to be a figment of her imagination represented by Vision that tells her that. That's my big swing, I guess.
I'd like to double down on your guess, and I'm going to push it even further. If we're making predictions for Endgame WandaVision here, not only will it be Vision that has to convince her, to give up the illusion, Vision is going to destruct himself. It could be like thinking ahead, thinking 3 steps ahead on where I think Wanda will end up in the larger MCU. It's been speculated by many people that Wanda is going to have a heel turn. After her face turn, another heel turn into being a villain in the next phase, which I think makes a ton of sense. I think that means WandaVision needs to end up with Wanda being broken. And so I think you are correct. She is going to create such a perfect creation of Vision that he will understand why he's there and choose to end himself, breaking Wanda further.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is the thing where we play the kind of the spoiler game, and it's like, how much of this is meta text? How much of this comes from the fact that we know the comics that it's based on, or we've seen the trailers, or we know for a fact that Elizabeth Olsen is signed up to appear in future Marvel movies, and which ones in particular, and what those movies are doing, which I find fascinating, because spoilers, because of a shared universe, spoilers are no longer, I guess how this story works. It's like, I guess how this story works, and I have this contextual information I can just kind of pile on top of it, and kind of like hedge that either way, and I find that fascinating. But I do kind of wonder if, given we see in the trailer that it looks like the two of them squaring off in the house at one point. It looks like he's lifting up and she's lifting up, and they are facing each other rather than facing the same direction. So I wonder if she might have a particularly violent or aggressive reaction to him saying, "I'm not real, you need to get out of here." And the fact that she turns up in Multiverse of Madness, I wonder if she may not necessarily take this in the spirit it's intended and decide to set out and find Vision outside of this, maybe. That she might not necessarily kind of like come back to reality completely, and instead try to look for alternate realities, maybe, or other instead of creating her own pocket one, go exploring outwards. But this is all very long game. Nobody can call us wrong for like weeks. It's fantastic.
That's You're right, the beautiful part. Years. They won't call us wrong for years.
Like I want to, because this was also in my notes that this episode really gave me the feeling that Wanda is the antagonist of this world. Like she's going to get a heel turn. So like I really did feel that as well. But now that everyone is saying that, I'm wondering if that's intentional and maybe they want to actually play on that expectation.
Yeah.
Oh man, they're playing 8-dimensional chess.
Chess. There'll be another turn. There'll be a face turn after the heel turn. Well, no, I think Casey's right here. I don't think Marvel have the guts to make her completely evil and irredeemable. Like, keep in mind that in Civil War, they didn't have the courage to have Tony Stark actually believe in registration, for example, because they were worried that would make him unpalatable to fans. I do think that you might get her being unsympathetic. I still think Agnes is the key here. I still think Agnes is knowing more than she says and is manipulating more than it looks like she's doing at the moment. She's consciously steering this. I think Wanda's culpable. I think Wanda's powers are obviously affecting the world. I suspect that there will be a get-out-of-jail-free clause morally at the end of this that says Wanda is not entirely responsible for all the terrible things, or she was driven mad by grief, or, it's not all her fault. Because let's face it, again, she set the Hulk loose in Johannesburg. She killed, 11 people in Lagos. I feel like this isn't necessarily the worst thing Wanda's ever done.
So the one new piece of information we got, the one we got 2 solid pieces of new information in this episode. The one big new piece is that the town that they are in is a real town.
Call that.
In the reality that Wanda has, basically cordoned off and has turned into her fantasy. And so then theoretically her neighbors, the boss character, any of the neighbor characters, any of the people in the town
doctor,
are being imprisoned in that cordoned off area. So that's pretty bad.
She's pretty bad.
Mind wiping, imprisoning people,
I did like, by the way, the town slogan is "Home is what you make it." But sorry, Casey, cut you off there.
That's a good catch. But like that, but I think that's one of the biggest clues that we got is when Vision kind of noticed his neighbors being a little odd, and then you got the scene where he's talking to them because clearly they were talking to each other about Wanda, right? So it does seem like it seems like Wanda has some sort of control over everyone who's in this area, and it seems like those people seem to know it, and maybe they are being influenced or getting their minds wiped or whatnot. And again, I feel like it's important we bring back the fact that both Vision and Wanda are both kind of products of that Mind Stone in the Infinity storyline. Mm-hmm. And if Wanda's ability is to infect all of these people's minds, that seems to be like the prison that they're held in. Like, also, and I guess we're kind of skipping a little bit forward, but the whole situation with Geraldine, who is Tiana Paris, Jack went and found out for us. Yes. She seems to be as affected by this as everyone else, but clearly she's from the outside, right? They had the clue of her wearing the sword pendant.
Well, that's the other new piece of information, right? Is she doesn't have a house inside the town, so she is, we can only assume, a sword agent who has infiltrated the town.
Yeah. I love, by the way, that they say, like, the way that Agnes kind of stokes up panic is this kind of very conservative 1950s, 1960s way of saying, she doesn't have a family. She doesn't have a husband. And Vision's response is the very sane and rational, well, why would that concern you? Yeah. Why is that a problem? And she's like, oh, she's not from round here, which is, again, very much in terms of that. But what I did find interesting about Tiana Paris, and it's something I really like in all the performances, but it's very obvious with Paris, is that the characters like code switch between kind of sitcom level conversation, accents, and dialogues. So there's moments where, and it's very obvious with Wanda, where Wanda speaks in an American accent. Like, one of my big issues with Wanda's characterization in the movie is that, like, she has this big Sokovian accent in Age of Ultron, where Elizabeth Olsen just goes for it. It's like, I have decided this is stereotypical Russian nation.
Beautiful.
I know, it's
theatrical.
Like, yeah. And then clearly, like in Civil War, somebody in the focus groups is like, you know, so all of a sudden Wanda kind of talks with this like pan-generic American accent, and I kind of love that like WandaVision retroactively is like suggesting actually what Wanda's doing is she's kind of passing, she's putting on that American accent to hide her Sokovian roots. And there's that wonderful moment where she says like Petro, and she says it in that accent, and then she sings the Sokovian lullaby. But even throughout you have things like, say, Paul Bettany as Vision, and I don't know, I'm maybe giving him too much credit here to be fair, but like there are moments when Bettany's really intense, and when things get really heightened for Vision, Bettany's accent kind of slips into the old British accent, as opposed to kind of like the mid-Atlantic accent that he puts on for the rest of the show. It's very kind of like very okay. I think his accent's very plain.
And this might be just, you know, this is your lovely perspective, being a citizen of Ireland, knowing those accents a little bit better. I can't tell the difference between Paul Bettany in any other movie and this. Like, it's all the same British, UK-ish thing. So that's just my American ear. So that might be your unique perspective.
Notice when he gets kind of like high pitched when he was drunk in the second episode, he got very British, for example, like really British, and like not in a bad way, in that kind of lovable stage British and American production way. But like with Paris and with Geraldine and with Rambeau, I really love that, like, when she's telling the story, it's stereotypical, like, 70s guest star African-American accent, where it's all full of kind of, like, sort of, like, verbal, kind of, like, that sort of stuff. And then...
she was jive.
Yeah, it's basically jive.
It's basically
sounding,
like stereotypical American TV in the 70s. And then when she kind of jumps up, it's like, what the hell is that? And it's her regular voice. It's the way that a normal person talks. And it's kind of like breaking character, which I really, really liked. And I think this is where it gets kind of interesting, because obviously her clothes change when she flies through the force field. So she's thrown out of... Don't they change? Oh, maybe they... Okay.
No, I think she was still in the 70s.
Oh, still in the 70s.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, outfit,
she still had the makeup, still the hair. I believe her clothes did not change.
Okay, cool. Well, that's grand, because I was kind of wondering in terms of that. So she clearly, I think she was aware of who she was, obviously, while she was in there. That she was infiltrating. She was always aware that she was Monica, even if she called herself Geraldine last week.
Well, I'm not so sure about that, honestly. I feel like maybe perhaps her job was to infiltrate and be whatnot, but you could clearly see her, like, whenever she was talking to Wanda specifically, just being very like flighty, like I don't like. There's something like I can't remember what I'm doing here. Like she literally said those words oftentimes.
Yeah.
Like when she was the stage manager for the play, like she showed up in the box and was asking, "How did I get in the box?" Like if she was a sword agent, I think she would know that Vision and Wanda have powers, but she seemed to be confused as to what she was doing. She got sucked into the world, and then those things like the stork showing up shocked her enough to bring her back. So like there is something affecting her mind, and clearly it's Wanda, because as soon as she became
herself,
she became herself. She started asking her questions about her brother, basically trying to get through to her. Wanda rejected it and literally rejected her from the entire city.
I feel like, and I think that's a valid interpretation. That could very possibly be true. I feel like that was a slip up because things got crazy. I think like her mentioning Pietro was a slip up. It reminds me a lot of in the first Avengers movie, the first Black Widow scene where, she's being interrogated and we think she's the victim. And all of a sudden there's the information turn that she's not being the victim. She is playing a game, with the Russian general interrogating her. Yeah. So I'm assuming that Monica Rambeau was playing the part of someone who, what are we doing here to help fit in and get little nuggets of information from Wanda? That's how I read that. So okay. I think that's going to be a fun reveal. How much did she know while she was in there?
And do we think that's coming next week, actually, which is interesting? That's like, do we think, okay, here we go.
Here's where we get into Cranky Jack time.
Okay.
We better get into something substantial next week because we are dangerously close to the we get it territory.
Like this is exactly what I was talking about on the last episode. Like like I love what the premise is, but like the pacing of getting us to the point where they're actually telling us the story, I feel like it's kind of hurting it in the long run.
I am with you so hard. We are hitting a lot of the same notes that we hit in episode 1 and 2, and guess what? We get it. Move on. Give us more than 2 nuggets of information in an entire freaking episode. It's cute. It's so cute that it's a 70s show. Oh yeah, they're doing a pregnancy bewitched thing. It's time to start the story. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly how I feel.
Darren continues to be generous and it's like, no, I'm with it so far.
I feel that the worst thing any story, any mystery, any joke can do is have the audience understand it before the story does. Yeah. If we have figured out what's going on before the characters do in a story, what's the point? We get it. Move on. Let's go. A well-crafted mystery, because this is a mystery, after all. A well-crafted mystery will align those two perfectly. As soon as the characters are figuring out, we, the audience, are figuring it out along with them. And we are hitting the point where we, the audience, know what's happening, and it's about time everyone else catches up, or else I feel like it's insulting our intelligence, and that's when I get cranky.
I think we're still kind of at just the right level in that I feel like you've just on the
this
but
is
but I know you can continue to gesticulate, but no, I think the fact that we're still having kind of these kind of like questions at the moment, like I think the show counts on you being smart enough to figure out as much as we figured out. And I think the show counts on us having the discussions that we're having at the moment where it's like, okay, we get the big picture stuff. She's controlling the entire town. We get the fact that she's now in control, which was a big reveal last week. Because the inherent assumption with something like this is, oh no, she's obviously brainwashed by somebody else. And maybe she still is, to be honest. But I mean, generally speaking, we're like, oh, it's her powers that are driving it. It's her choices to rewind it and stuff like that. I feel like we're not quite ahead of it yet, in that we're still having arguments about who knows exactly what when sort of stuff. Sure. And I feel like this is the sweet spot. I do think you're right. It does need to happen next week. There needs to be more, and there needs to be substantively more. But I'm not yet at the my eyes are widening and I'm leaning towards the camera stage of kind of reacting to it yet. I'm still in the stage where it's like, this reminds me of kind of like 70s sitcoms and the old kind of comfort hangout food. And like, this is, kind of charming. It's not really that funny, which is not really a problem for a sitcom, given that most of the shows that it's based about weren't particularly funny to me either. So, kind of like it captures that sense of the audience is laughing, so I know when I'm supposed to laugh, that I associate with so many of these sitcoms in syndication. And I find the performances charming. I find the kind of mystery is still simmering there beneath the surface. And I like the difference in tone from everything that came before enough that it's like, okay, I can coast through this for the moment. So I'm not quite at Pitchforks level here. I'm not quite at,
I'm not saying I'm at Pitchforks. What I'm saying is I'm looking at my pitchfork.
Yeah,
you've
taken it out of the cupboard and just sort of rested on the wall.
It's there. It's like, do I grab it now? Because I'm ready to. But yes, we'll see. I'm not like sharpening the pitchfork or anything, but I see it.
Yeah.
Well, do we know how many episodes this season is supposed to have in total?
9. It's
9.
So basically 8 weeks. So we are 3 weeks in. So we're out of the first act roughly, which makes sense where we are in terms of story, because it's the end of the first act and then you expand the world presumably.
Are you assuming now that since we did get like this kind of bigger reveal at the end of the episode, this next episode will maybe entirely take place outside of Wanda's bubble and like just tell you what the people are doing outside of there, and kind of what, like, will we get that big of an info dump, you think, or will they continue to go back in and kind of keep teasing us? Because I think that's the thing that is kind of irritating Jack so much, and it's the kind of thing that I was hoping that they wouldn't do, which is kind of continuously tease out the mystery that we're all waiting for the reveal for until like the very end of this season. Like 9 episodes isn't that much, to be fair. Yeah. So if they do that reveal too early, and that's what they were hoping to kind of end on, then you could end up with basically those first couple episodes that were so nostalgic based don't matter. Yeah. And it's basically a regular conventional superhero story from like episode 4 on or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like there's a lot to mine in terms of that, even if you do one episode outside, because logically that's what you would do. Format wise, it would be a format breaking episode. It would be because you're taking advantage of television. So it's like the bulk of these 30 minutes will be spent with the characters that we know are outside, the kind of the world of the film. So the world of the TV show that Wanda's created. So agents like the guy from Ant-Man, for example, or Darcy from Thor, obviously Monica that we know as well.
Randall Park from the Ant-Man and Wasp is showing back up again. Kat Dennings from the Thor movies is showing back up. Absolutely.
And I mean, you don't cast those people, you don't drag those people in if you're not going to do something with all of them together. You might bring one of them in for a quick cameo, but if you're going to have that many cast members together, you assume it's like, well, we need to be able to spend time with these people and do something with them.
So I wanted to bring up the fact that we didn't really talk about Monica Rambeau as a character in WandaVision in those first 2 episodes, because the show doesn't tell you that. Like, you don't get that information from the show, and you don't even get that information from this 3rd episode.
Exactly.
We literally only know that because we went and looked up the casting information. Like, a friend of mine had, like, because me and a friend of mine were talking about the last 2 episodes, and he told me, oh, that's supposed to be Monica Rambeau. And I'm like, how do you know that?
IMDb.
And like that information comes from outside of the show. Like, I was very confused. Like what is the theory of how? And honestly, that kind of reveal, I feel like, hurts the quality of the actual show you're watching.
Yeah, well,
because that feels more like a spoiler than it is kind of like that meta knowledge is now kind of seeping into what the story is actually being told.
And like I think that is like that's like worthy of an entire episode conversation itself. And that's like a lot of conversations when it comes to these larger IP properties, because we are all looking up news on these items to talk about them. Information like who Teyana Paris is playing comes up, which is a super spoiler. The show has not said she's she's Monica Rambeau yet. And so, like, compartmentalizing outside information with information that the show gives you is sometimes a balancing act. What I will say is, like, they made it very clear, at least in this episode, that she was a sword agent. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess, like, even knowing what a sword agent is meta
it's information
knowledge.
from outside as well. Yeah,
you're right.
Exactly.
You're right. But they want us to know that because the whole reason they're making this is because it's based off of already popular properties. and they're hoping we watch it because we know the older properties and.
And they're also hoping that like the internet information sphere just self-perpetuates. Like every article that you publish, every podcast discussion that we're having is promotion for the show, and it's designed to give you a deep dive and to get people very curious. And like I love that there are these sorts of Easter eggs buried within it, to be entirely clear. Like I love, for example, the fact that like in the animated introduction to the second episode, you can see the Grim Reaper from the comics. You can see his mask buried kind of in the furnishings, which is a reference to Tom King's run on Vision, where the Grim Reaper is killed by Vision's wife and buried in the backyard. And it's like, I don't know if the show's actually going to do this. I don't know if the Grim Reaper is ever going to actually show up, because he's tied to all sorts of continuity that the movies haven't even touched, and probably for good reason, to be clear. But I kind of admire the fact that it's buried in there so that it will generate like a 600-word post on like Decider in order to generate content and kind of discussion.
Or the fact that they name themselves Glamour and Illusion, which old comic book fans will know. Or did you see that even like deeper dive where someone found a still from episode 2 and the wallpaper in their house on episode 2 was showing Strucker's fortress from Age of Ultron? It's like, how are you that observant? How is any person that observant?
A couple of ones that I really liked from this episode, because we're just going to rattle these off. When they pause in the sitting room, like after she like the kitchen's gone wild, they do the actual pose from the cover of the 1980s Visions of the Scarlet Witch kind of comic book. The actual one that they're doing like the kung fu pose. That's the pose from the first issue of Steve Englehart's miniseries. Another one that I really, really liked in this is the fact that when Vision's doing his little nappy fix as quickly as possible, that's a Kitty Carryall doll from the 1969 Brady Bunch TV show. The one that is Cindy used to have and used to carry with her all the time. Yeah, so like that's the doll.
That's a lot of really neat attention to detail. Absolutely.
Yeah. And again, favorite really tiny one that I love and I adore. It's like Phil and Donna, you know, the quick cutaway where they do the stereotypical sitcom joke where it's like, do these earrings make me look fat? And the power goes out and he goes, thank God. But if you look at the paper that he's holding, the paper headline is 2 new fire hydrants installed. But the way in which, here we go, this is where it gets beautiful. The way in which he holds the paper means that the NT in hydrants is obscured. So it's new fire hydra. And it's like, I see what you did there, TV show.
Also, aside to your aside, we need an official David Lengel appreciation thread, because that man is hilarious. I love looking at him. We have to now guess what's coming up next week. While I like the idea, KC, that we are going to have an entire episode outside of the bubble, I think personally I would enjoy that. I think we're coming back with 80s television, which here's my gut reaction. A lot of 80s sitcom took place in schools. So we are going to have a schoolhouse episode. The children are going to schools. Or, you know, someone's a teacher. Maybe Wanda gets a job as a substitute teacher, and that's going to be the episode. That's my personal word for thing I'm guessing. Prediction.
Okay.
Wow. Bye, brain.
Okay, that's a good one. Yeah. I think that they may actually move away from the TV show tropes and maybe just go into broader, like just media in general.
Okay.
And this is sort of cheating because we have seen stuff from the trailers. We know that there's an episode where they're experiencing Halloween, right? Yeah. I feel like their 80s stuff will take place in like a Halloween, like the horror movie type situation. So like you'll get like the horror stuff will be played up big because like they had the big turn and everyone knows something is wrong. So everyone's going to be on edge, especially around Wanda, because I think she is the big bad for this show. And so, yeah, like it'll be a play on like 80s horror movies versus like 80s TV sitcoms.
Yeah, because I do think one of the interesting things about kind of 80s sitcoms is that, like, you leave the golden age of the domestic sitcom, arguably, or at least the domestic sitcom as WandaVision imagines it, which is this kind of crushingly conservative, stereotypical environment when you get to the 80s. Because when you get to the 80s, you see a lot more of things like, say, Family Matters, or things like, say, The Cosby Show. You see more diverse perspectives creeping in around the edges. And there aren't really, even though it was the Reagan era, I think in terms of, like, actual, like, stereotypical white kind of middle-class families, I think as a Family Ties is probably the only one that you can reference from the era. So I guess, like, that's my crazy pitch, is next week is probably going to be Family Ties. I do think that we will break the format, though. I do think that we will step outside the bubble. And the reason I think that is precisely because of, it's the same thing that KC mentioned there, which is you're reaching the limits of what you can do with the sitcom format. You're going to have to start doing something new with it at some point. I do like that the Brady Bunch, I do like that we got 3 episodes of it, but yes, I do think that we are going to have to do something else, and do something else quite shortly. So I still think next week will probably be outside the bubble. I don't know if it'll be entirely outside the bubble, but I think that most of it will be. And I think that we will get some explanation, but not a lot of explanation. And there will be a lot of, well, we don't know how this thing works, in order to keep the mystery going for another, after this, 5 episodes? Right. So the other half of the series, basically.
You know what would be fun is, the 80s was also kind of the rise of must-see TV, right? During the 80s was the time in which everyone had a television and TV became such a huge medium. And so I could see them doing an episode outside the bubble where we, instead of being inside the show and little peeks outside the bubble, it's outside the bubble where people are watching it on the TV, which we know they do already from episode 1. And so we'll get just like all of our characters outside the bubbles watching the TV show because it's the era of that.
And crazy pitch here, but like you mentioned the idea of must-see TV, because the 80s was the decade where the television event became a thing. Yes. And obviously, like, Who Shot J.R., the biggest TV event, arguably in the history of TV events. Will Wanda, when it hits the 80s, do something like that? Will it do something? Will there be, like, a mystery within the world of the sitcom? Will there be an earth-shattering event
within... Oh my God. It's going to end on a cliffhanger, Vision dies, or like the neighbor dies, yes, and like it ends on a cliffhanger because you're absolutely right. That was the big thing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love it.
Okay, cool. We did it.
We did it. We didn't actually talk about what we said we'd talk about last week, but we can do it next week. It'll be grand. When we have a quiet week, we'll talk about like movies versus TV and stuff. I got like the idea of how they're tying together. I think there was enough here to talk about, which is great, because I was actually like, when we launched the show, I was like, we'll never find enough stuff to talk about for 25 minutes every week. He says 40 minutes into the episode.
We are 3 opinionated nerds. Give us 1 page and you'll have an hour. Don't worry. Yeah. All right. Well, that was great. That was a fantastic conversation. Thank you all for listening and or watching. Once again, I've been Jack Packard here for The Escapist.
I've been Darren Mooney.
And I've been KC Wosu.
And I've run out of Stan Lee catchphrases.
Excelsior!
I think I said it. See you next time, true believer.